Welcome back, everybody. My name is Zach. I'm a photographer and videographer, but more important than that, I'm a husband and father. And last week, I released a video talking about how to film in Super 8. I gave my top tips on filming in Super 8, the things that you should know, things that you should be aware of. And today, I'm going to talk about how I edit my Super 8 footage. Now, let me just say, I think this video is going to be a little bit different than that last video because in that one I was giving some clear tips on the things that I think everyone should do. This one, I think it's a little bit more subjective. I think the way that you go about editing Super 8 is going to differ from person to person because we're all different people, we're all different creative people. So you may have a certain style or a look or an idea that you like better than I do and vice versa. So I'm going to walk you through the things that I do with most of the Super 8 footage I work with. And then at the end, I will walk through my most recent Super 8 film and kind of break it down and talk about why I chose to do things a certain way. Okay, let me stop and say I'm not going to do that because this video just ended up being way too long with that. So that's actually going to be a whole separate video. I'll put that out on Monday. So check that out if you want to see like the behind the scenes of how I made my last video. But for just this video, I'll walk you through like my main go-tos when it comes to editing Super 8. So let's get back into it. If you're into Super 8 footage and you want to get into filming in Super 8 or learning a little bit more about it, I do recommend go back and watch the last video on how to shoot in Super 8 because honestly, Super 8 is just an amazing creative medium. It's so fun and it's kind of unique right now. It's hitting a resurgence. But it's just so fun to work with. And I've been loving it for weddings, for personal stuff. It's just been amazing. So let's go ahead and jump into it. I'll walk you through the things that I do when I work with Super 8 footage. And then again, I'll walk you through how I edited my last Super 8 film. Okay, so there's 5 things I typically do whenever I get my Super 8 footage back and start editing. And the first thing I do is when I get that footage back, I go ahead and open it up and I start playing some music underneath it. For me, I want to watch through my full reel and kind of experience it for the first time. I think when you're filming in Super 8 or in film, it's different than filming in digital. And so there's always kind of a question of what did I capture, right? We know what we filmed, but the question is, what did I capture? Did it get, the shot that I wanted? Did I get it in focus? And all these different things. So it's kind of like a reveal to ourselves when we get to watch that footage back for the first time. I've told my wife I feel like a kid on Christmas, watching my footage back. And so I like to put music underneath it just to kind of enhance the vibe, make it a little bit more fun for myself. And sometimes it's music that I've already got in mind for what I'm going to use this footage for. Sometimes it's not, and I just play some of my favorite music in the background. Either way, I think it's just something fun to do and kind of starts me off in the right step because it starts to put me into a creative mindset. The next thing I do once I've watched the footage back is I will start to go through and color correct it. So I know that I'm not going to film perfectly. I know that there are going to be times where I get the color setting wrong, right? Like I forget to switch it over into daylight when I go outside, or I forget to switch it into tungsten when I go inside. Like I know that's just going to happen. And so for me, I always have my film delivered back to me in a log format so that I can adjust those mistakes that I've made, but also so I can kind of pick the own colors that I want for my film. I don't think there's anything wrong with having the place where you send your footage off to baking color in if that's what you want. I just prefer to do it in log. And so the first thing I'll do when I'm actually editing and working with the footage, I will go through and I will adjust the exposures, I'll adjust the colors so that everything matches and flows right. And then I'll put a LUT on top of it that I think brings about the look that I want. And the nice thing about doing this as well is it actually causes me to go through and cut up the whole long footage, because when you get your footage back delivered to you, it's not going to be in individual clips. It's going to be in one long 3-minute or 6-minute, however many reels you use, basically. It's going to be in one long clip. And so in order to go through and actually, edit certain clips color, you have to cut it up from each other. So this kind of forces me to go through and cut up the big long clip into the individual clips or in individual groups of clips that then can be used later in the editing process. So the next thing I'll do is I will go through and start trying to find some music for my footage. So typically I like to go with something that has a little bit of folk to it. I feel like the folk just complements the nostalgic feel of the Super 8. Maybe a little bit of indie, a little bit of songwriter in there, but I like having a specific look to the footage, and I like having a specific feel to it, and folk just kind of complements that, for me at least. Now, if I'm doing something like a wedding video, that might change, because I know that some of our brides may not like folk, even if that does fit the feel of Super 8. And so in those cases, I kind of switch it up to maybe a little bit of soul, but still something that has a little bit of like that old school feel to it, if that makes sense to you. Now, where the music will differ from other projects that I'm working on, usually in other projects that aren't like Super 8 film, I'm editing to the music, right? Like I'm using the music kind of as a way to figure out when should clips transition and things like that. With Super 8, I still do that to a certain degree, but I'm not as strict with it. I don't have to have a clip transition right on the beat or right on the rise or fall or whatever like that, because to me, I think there's still a little bit of a rawness and a pureness to the Super 8, and I want to protect that. And so I don't necessarily care as much. Like I'll still try to get it close, but if it's not perfect, that's fine by me. Now the next area is sound effects. So when it comes to Super 8 films for me, I don't add in a lot of sound effects most of the time. Typically what I'll add in is the sound of a projector, because I feel like that does enhance the footage. It does enhance the feel and the vibe. As you're watching this film back, you feel like you're watching it with a projector. And so I do like adding on the sound of a projector, and usually in almost every time I use Super 8, I'll have that being played, whether it's its own standalone Super 8 film or whether I'm using that film in addition to other footage in like a wedding or other personal projects. I'll typically always have that in there. At the same time, with other projects where they're not solely Super 8 films, I think it does help you transition in your mind from watching digital to watching film when you hear that projector going. So I do like it for that account. Other than that though, I typically shy away from sound effects. Sometimes in very rare situations, I'll add in a little bit of sound effect if it feels like the video can handle it. I don't really want to take away from the pureness and the rawness of Super 8 because Super 8 doesn't have sound. So on solely Super 8 films, I probably don't put in a lot of sound effects, if any at all. On films where it's being used with other footage, I might add in a little bit here and there, but it's super minimal and I don't want it to be very obvious. And that's just my personal preference. I think there's other people out there who would do it differently, and that's totally fine. I just kind of, especially with the sound element, I feel like I lean more on like the purist side of things. And then the final thing, it's all about style. So again, Super 8 film, you can edit it however you want and be super creative in it. And so I think the style that you choose to edit in is going to be completely your own. For me personally, I think there's a couple of different ways that I typically go about it. If I'm doing something like I'm adding it into wedding footage, right? If it's going to be in the wedding film, it's not going to be the only footage you see. You're going to see digital footage from other cameras. I'll take the best clips and add that into the video. If I'm doing something where I just give the bride and groom their full Super 8 video, which is basically I throw the video on a timeline, I color correct it, add in a light, and I put some music underneath it, and that's all I do. Because in that sense, I want them to have kind of that raw, that pure, this is everything that the camera captured. And if there's clips where someone walks into the camera, into the shot, then they get that. And I think so in that sense, that's where I'm like the most purist mindset. I want them just to be able to see everything that was captured on the Super 8 film. And I want it to kind of be like those old school films that our parents would have. But I do like to color correct it, and I do like to add a little bit of music underneath it just to help set the tone and set the vibe for the couples when they're watching it. When it comes to a Super 8 film, like this one that I'm about to show you, I'm less purist about it. And when I'm saying purist, that's just my definition for like not cutting the footage up a lot and changing a lot of stuff, right? Like when it comes to making solo films from Super 8, I don't necessarily care as much if I'm cutting the footage up and taking stuff out or moving stuff around. To me, I'm using the footage to help tell a story. There are other times, like I said, where the Super 8 footage is the story, and so I don't mess with it as much. So I think it all just depends on the project, on what you're wanting to do with it, what story you're wanting to tell with it, and what then fits best for that. When it comes to exporting your footage, I think there's a couple of different ways you can do it. There's 3 big ways that I do it. I will export the footage in 1920 by 1080, which is just the basic look that you get. And that's something that, you know, for my own personal stockpile of videos that we'll go back to as a family, like I like to watch it that way, or on YouTube, I'll post it that way. If I'm posting it to Instagram, I don't want it to be 1920 by 1080 because you're looking at it in the 1080 by 1920 perspective. And so I'll actually take the footage and flip it so that you're utilizing the full screen to watch the footage. And yeah, it's on the side. You know, when someone scrolls up on it on Instagram, they're gonna have to tilt their phone. But to me, I'm like, I think that's fun and unique, and I like that. Then when I'm using Super 8 footage in like a reel, say for a wedding, right? I'm using it in line with other footage. I don't want to punch in and just zoom into the footage and cut out the feel of Super 8, right? I don't want to lose the edging of the Super 8. And so I'll actually layer it with the same shot above it and the same shot below it to kind of create a film strip look. That way you're still seeing the full Super 8 clip, but then you're seeing it alongside and you don't have any dead space either. So I think there's a bunch of different ways that you can go about editing your Super 8 film and exporting it into the style that you like. Those are just some of the ways that I personally do it. Okay, like I said, if you want to see the behind the scenes of my last Super 8 film, I'll put that in another video. It just got too long with this. So that's how I like to edit my Super 8 films. If you enjoyed this video, please do give it a thumbs up, subscribe if you're not already, and stick around. I want to put out more videos about, you know, these sorts of topics of filming family in different mediums, whether it be Super 8 or whether it be on something like the Pocket 3, which is what this is being filmed on now. Stick around for that. I'd love to have you a part of the channel. So we'll talk to you later, and I'll see you on Monday for that behind the scenes video of my last Super 8 film.